welcome to the deep dive. Okay, so you've shared this personal guide about handling money and just, daily life in Shenzhen.
That's right.
Our mission here is really to dig into it, pull out the key insights for anyone maybe thinking about moving there or who's already living there, especially focusing on practical ways to save money and navigate what sounds like a pretty unique Shenzhen experience.
Exactly. And this guide, it's pretty packed. Lots of practical stuff on cost of living. Think rent, food, getting around, but also the financial system itself, how to shop smart, and even a bit of a reality check on that whole digital nomad idea in Shenzhen.
Yeah, and something that jumped out at me right away, kind of mind-bending, is how the guide suggests your whole perception of costs might just flip.
Yeah.
Here in the U.S., goods often feel cheaper than paying for services.
Right.
Well, in Shenzhen, it sounds like services can be surprisingly affordable, while some goods, especially imported ones, might actually hit your wallet harder.
Yeah, that's a key theme. Services being cheaper than goods is kind of the opposite of what many folks from the U.S. might expect.
Okay, so let's dive into that. How does this actually play out in, your day-to-day budget?
Well, it's fascinating because it could genuinely change how you live. Let's take rent. The guide mentions you could find a place maybe on the outskirts for as low as $250 a month.
Wow, okay.
But if you want to be downtown, you're looking closer to maybe $800. And furnished places are pretty common, which is helpful. The guide also smartly suggests maybe looking at on-campus housing first, if that's an option. Good way to save some cash up front.
Makes total sense, yeah. Start simple. And what about food? Sounds like another area for potential savings.
Oh, definitely. If you cook at home, the guide estimates you could potentially get by on groceries for as little as, say, $15 a week.
$15? Seriously?
Yeah, focusing on local produce and markets. Now, eating out is also pretty cheap, maybe $5 for a decent meal. But, like you said, if you're craving those specific imported Oreos or whatever, that's where the costs creep up. So, yeah, hitting local markets and using your kitchen seems like the best bet for both your wallet and, probably nutrition, too.
Right. And getting around town.
Super affordable. Public transport is incredibly cheap. We're talking 50 cents a ride on the subway or bus.
Right.
Even taxis aren't bad, maybe $5 to get across different districts. So relying on the public system is definitely key to keeping those transport costs low.
Okay, so daily essentials seem manageable. What about, enjoying yourself a bit? Social life, maybe.
Good question. Local beer is apparently a real steal, 75 cents.
Nice.
But yeah, if you want craft beer or imported wine, then the prices start looking a lot more like what you'd see back in the US or Europe.
Okay, standard enough. But then we get to the services part.
Yeah.
This is where that flip happens, right?
Exactly. This is where it gets really interesting. The guide mentions haircuts for maybe $5 to $20. And get this, an hour-long massage for just $10.
$10 for an hour. That's a completely different world compared to here.
Totally. It really opens up possibilities for things you might consider luxuries back home. On a more practical note, health insurance. Local insurance is usually provided by employers.
Right.
But the guide does recommend looking into international plans, especially for anything serious or if you plan on traveling outside China much.
Good tip.
Yeah.
And staying connected. Phone, internet.
Also surprisingly cheap. Something like $10 a month might get you 2 GB of data and Wi-Fi access. You might just need a local friend or colleague to help with the setup process initially.
Okay.
Even hotels, if you need a temporary place, are pretty budget-friendly, around $30 a night according to the guide.
So the day-to-day costs, while different, seem very manageable if you're smart about it.
Yeah.
But the financial system itself sounds like a learning curve.
Oh, absolutely. It's very different. WeChat Pay is huge. It basically dominates digital payments. You use QR codes for almost everything.
Literally everything. Paying for street food, splitting a dinner bill.
Yep. Groceries, taxis, sending money to friends. It's incredibly integrated and convenient once you're set up. But actually getting that bank account set up can be a bit of a headache. The guide suggests you'll likely need help from your company's HR department.
Okay, so not something you can just walk in and do easily.
Probably not, no. And the bank cards function mainly as debit cards. Traditional credit cards like Visa or MasterCard issued by Chinese banks aren't really common for locals.
Interesting.
You might even need multiple bank accounts if you work for different employers over time. And the guide strongly advises keeping your U.S. credit cards active for international online purchases, booking flights, and, crucially, maintaining your U.S. credit score.
Ah, good point. Don't want that to lapse. What about sending money out of China? back home.
Yeah, that's another hurdle. The guide points out that converting your RMB earnings back into, say, US dollars can be difficult and potentially costly. You often need specific documentation, like tax receipts and employment contracts.
Sounds bureaucratic.
It can be. Bank transfers seem to be the most recommended method for sending larger sums home, rather than trying to carry cash or use less formal methods.
Okay, good to know. Let's switch gears to shopping. We mentioned that services are cheaper than goods. How does that play out when you actually go to buy stuff?
Right, so for groceries, it's somewhat similar to what you'd expect. You've got your local wet markets, your mid-range supermarkets like Vanguard or Carrefour, and then fancier places like Ols that stock lots of imported goods, which will be pricier.
And any shopping hacks?
The guide mentions looking for discounts near closing time at supermarkets, which is pretty common. For non-grocery items, Shenzhen has these specialized streets or huge markets for specific things, electronics in Wakangbei, clothing in Dongmen. And it also mentions these urban villages where you can often find the absolute cheapest stuff.
Is bargaining expected everywhere?
Less so in established stores or supermarkets, but definitely more common in the markets or smaller shops, especially in those villages. It depends on the context.
And online shopping. China's huge for that, right?
Sure. Massive. The guide highlights two main players. Taobao, which is kind of like eBay or Amazon Marketplace, vast selection, generally cheaper prices.
Okay.
And Jingdong, or JD.com, which is known for slightly higher quality, particularly for electronics, and really fast, reliable delivery, often to secure lockers in your apartment complex.
Convenient. Returns easy.
Can be more difficult than in the US, according to the guide, something to keep in mind. There are also tons of apps for deals on food, services, group buys, but they're mostly in Chinese, so language can be a barrier.
Gotcha. Oh, and there was a quick tip about product labels.
Yeah, a little detail. If a product's barcode, the UPC, starts with the number 69, it means it was manufactured in China. Just a small observation.
Handy. Okay, now, the digital nomad dream. Someone thinks, great, cheap living, I'll just work remotely from Shenzhen. What does the guide say?
Yeah, it kind of pours some cold water on that idea, at least for mainland China. The internet, while usable, can be slower, and obviously many Western apps and sites are blocked by the Great Firewall, requiring a VPN, which can be unreliable.
Right, the VPN hassle.
Plus, office culture is still very strong, and regulations apparently make it difficult even for Chinese companies to employ people fully remotely if they're based elsewhere. It's just not really set up for that digital nomad lifestyle.
So Hong Kong, maybe?
The guide mentions it as a possible alternative, as it has a different internet and legal system, but it comes with its own set of challenges, particularly the much higher cost of living.
Right, much higher. Okay, so maybe not the remote work paradise some imagine. What about earning extra cash on the side? Any opportunities mentioned?
The guide does list a few things people do, like English tutoring, often kind of under the table, or maybe managing WeChat groups for businesses, or acting as a sort of connector between local factories and buyers overseas.
But potentially legally gray areas.
Yeah, it implies some of these might not be strictly above board, depending on your visa status and how you go about it. So something to approach with caution.
Definitely. So wrapping this up, it sounds like Shenzhen offers this really distinct financial world. There are clear ways to save money, especially leveraging those cheaper services, but it absolutely requires adapting. You got to learn new systems, new ways of paying, new cultural norms around money.
Absolutely. It's not just about the numbers. It's about embracing a different economic reality and being flexible, being open to figuring things out as you go.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave our listeners with. Given that huge difference in the cost of services, massages, haircuts, maybe even things like tailoring or repairs, how might living in Shenzhen fundamentally shift your daily habits or what you choose to spend your money on compared to life back home? What new experiences or, I don't know, skills might suddenly become way more accessible? It's definitely something interesting to ponder.
For sure. It could really change your lifestyle priorities.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us into navigating Shenzhen's unique landscape.